So, first one, the photosynthesis and cellular respiration formula, right? So make sure that you remember the two formulas. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration's formula are really just the opposite of each other. For cellular respirations, you're taking the glucose, right? Glucose plus oxygen, right? O2, and then you're gonna turn it into carbon dioxide and water. Okay, yes?
What you write on there, will it stay on the slide? So we'll see that.
Yes. So this is the formula for cellular respiration. Cellular respiration. For photosynthesis is the opposite, right? Photosynthesis, they're taking carbon dioxide and water and then turn it into food, which is glucose and oxygen. So this is photosynthesis. Know that for photosynthesis, your reactants, right? Reactant is anything that is before the arrow, right? So the reactant for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide and water. And the reactants for cellular respiration is glucose and oxygen. So anything before the arrow is reactant, anything after the arrow is product. Good? Next, you need to know the differences between photosynthesis and cellular respirations. First things, their organelle is different. Photosynthesis, the organelles that's being used for photosynthesis is chloroplast. The organelle that's involved in respiration, at the very least for aerobic respiration, is mitochondria. Very good. So mitochondria. The cycles, right, the steps that's involved in photosynthesis are light-dependent reaction and light-independent reaction, which is Calvin's cycle. So far we have learned a few cycles, right? The ATP cycles from ADP to ATP, the cell cycles from one cell to two cells, the Krebs cycle, which is for cellular respiration, and Calvin's cycle for photosynthesis. Yes?
So, is respiration
No, both light-dependent and independent are photosynthesis, right? So everything that I write over here is photosynthesis. Anything that I write over here is respiration. So for mitochondria, you had 3 steps, correct? The first step is glycolysis, and then the next step is Krebs cycle, and then last is electron transport chain. Electron transport chain. As you can see in this picture, we have the mitochondria doing the cellular respirations, producing ATP, and then release carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide and water is taken in by photosynthesis, by chloroplast doing photosynthesis, producing food and oxygen. So both of them are going to get the energy from, right? So for photosynthesis, they get their energy from sunlight. For respiration, they get their energy from food. And of course, just like I mentioned already, their reactants or products are different and opposite. Photosynthesis, their reactants is carbon dioxide and water, and then what they produce is glucose and oxygen. For cellular respirations, what they take in is glucose and oxygen, and they produce carbon dioxide and water. Next. Okay, how does photosynthesis act as a carbon collector and reduce global warming? Yeah, the greenhouse effect gases, or what we call greenhouse gases, right? So greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, water vapor, and another one is what we call methane, or CH4. So the more gases, the more this type of gases in the atmosphere, the hotter the Earth is going to be. So plants can absorb carbon dioxide and water and turn it into food. So there will be less carbon dioxide and water in the atmosphere if we have more trees. So this is how they reduce global warming. They absorb carbon dioxide and water through the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis absorbs CO2 and H2O, and they release glucose and O2 or oxygen. Good. Next. A. What's the difference between light-dependent reaction and light-independent reaction? So, okay, Benjamin?
One needs light and one doesn't necessarily need light.
Correct. So one needs light, one doesn't need light. Light-dependent reaction needs light in order to happen. Light-independent reaction doesn't need light. So light-dependent reaction is the electron transport chain, and then the light-independent reaction is,
I got it.
and then the light-independent reaction is Calvin cycle. Need to know the name. Light-dependent reaction is an electron transport chain. So electron transport chain, and light-independent reaction is Calvin cycle. So this is light-independent reaction.
You write the other one, light and light and then another one.
So here we have the light-dependent reactions, correct? You need to know what do they take in and what do they make. Light-dependent reaction takes in water and makes oxygen. Light-independent reaction takes in carbon dioxide and makes sugar or glucose.
So they need both of those, right?
And then combine them together, you have photosynthesis.
Which makes food.
Yes.
What does light dependent do, sir?
Light-dependent reaction has light, right? And then they split the water into oxygen. And then you see that there's ATP and NADPH. Light-dependent reaction is going to make ATP in order to power Calvin cycle. So Calvin cycle is going to turn carbon dioxide to sugar. Pretty easy and direct, right? Water, light, split, oxygen. Make some ATP, go to Calvin cycle, turn carbon dioxide to sugar. Location, you need to know where does it happen. Light-independent reaction happens at thylakoid. You know this stack structure that looks like choco pie on top of each other, right? So light-dependent reactions happens at thylakoid. Each of this like structure is a thylakoid. Light-independent reaction happens at stroma. Basically, the regions that's not inside thylakoid, but inside chloroplast. This is a chloroplast. So a chloroplast organelle. Anything that's not inside thylakoid is what we call a stroma region. It's like the cytoplasm of chloroplasts. Okay. Light-dependent reactions. So as you can see, these animations over here, this blue thing that's getting hit on and off, like shining here, this light. When light shines onto this protein, right? You don't need to know the name of this protein as PS2 or PS1. That's not important. But you do need to know what's inside this protein. There's a tiny little pigment called chlorophyll that can detect the sunlight. So chlorophyll in these proteins detect the sunlight, and then they start exciting these electrons. So now you have energy in this membrane to do active transport. So you see that all these hydrogen ions, right? They start going from low concentration to high concentration through active transport. Okay.
How about passive?
In simple terms, active transport, right? Do you see that all these hydrogen ions, they are very low concentration, correct? Because you see very little hydrogen out here. And then there's a lot of hydrogen out here, correct? So they are moving from low to high. So low concentration to high concentration, you need active transport. In photosynthesis, where do you get the energy from?
Light.
Light. You get the energy from light directly.
How about passive transport? It doesn't matter.
So do you see passive transport over here?
No.
So this is high concentration. They flow to low concentration. Isn't this passive transport?
Yeah. I'm saying like,
Yeah.
how does that work with light though?
You don't need light, right? Light is for active transport. And then for passive transport, you don't need light. However, you do need a high concentration of hydrogen ion. Where do you get the high concentration from? From the active transport. Because they keep building this concentration out here. And then this hydrogen ion are gonna flow through this protein.
So you never end in loop.
It's a loop. Biology is always about loops. It's circle of life.
So much for perpetual machines.
Yeah.
So for active transport, you don't need that?
No, active transport you need light because you need energy. Right?
You get that energy.
From the sunlight, correct. And then for passive transport, it's just this hydrogen ion from high concentration to low concentration. Through what protein? Through the ATP synthase. So passive transport. So hydrogen ion from high concentration, right? High concentration of hydrogen ion to low concentration of hydrogen ion through the protein of ATP synthase. So know that chlorophyll is the one that detects the sunlight. Know that the sunlight powers the active transport. Know that the passive transport is hydrogen ion from high concentration to low concentration through ATP synthase. What's the function of ATP synthase?
Create ATP.
Yeah, to make ATP. Why do we need to make ATP?
Because we need it in order to power the Calvin cycle.
Yeah, to make food, you need energy. So ATP is used to power the Calvin cycle. Yes?
So passive transport is
Say that again? Yes, that's the correct sentence. ATP is made through the use of passive transport. So here's another picture, right? A diagrammatic version of the picture. Chlorophyll is in this green protein, right? So light hits chlorophyll, split water into oxygen,
Using active transport.
and then active transport, right? This energy is used for active transport to let hydrogen ion to go from low to high. And then now I have high concentration of hydrogen ion here.
And just passive to make ATP.
Correct. So here, high concentration of hydrogen ion. So there's low concentration of hydrogen ion. And then you make ATP. Good? So once you get the ATP, that also ATP goes to Calvin cycle. For Calvin cycle, at our level, it's very easy. All you need to know is that the ATP is being used to make that Calvin cycles happen. Calvin cycle's job is to get carbon dioxide into the delicious glucose.